My name is Esperanza Blackwell, and at 65 years old, I never expected to be calling the police on my own daughter-in-law. As a retired jewelry appraiser, the collection my late husband Theodore left me is my most treasured possession, especially that pink diamond ring worth $3 million, though it looks deceptively simple to the untrained eye. Audrey always coveted my jewelry, but I never imagined she would take something without permission. When I got her text about borrowing my ring, I knew exactly which one she meant. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you want to hear how I taught my sneaky daughter-in-law a lesson she'll never forget. I spent 40 years in the jewelry business, starting as a young apprentice at just 22. Back then, women weren't expected to know the difference between a real diamond and cubic zirconia, but I had an eye for authenticity that surprised everyone in the industry. That talent led me to Theodore Blackwell, a renowned gemstone trader who came to the shop where I worked to authenticate a rare blue sapphire. He was impressed by my knowledge, and I was charmed by his passion for precious stones that matched my own. Theodore was 15 years my senior, but we connected immediately over our shared love of rare gems. 6 months after we met, he proposed with a small but exquisite emerald ring he had personally sourced from Colombia. We built our lives around our passion, traveling to mines and markets across the world, gradually building a collection that would eventually become my security in retirement. Our son James came along 5 years into our marriage. Unlike us, he never developed much interest in gems or jewelry. He was always more interested in books and later computers. Theodore and I agreed that was perfectly fine. We raised him to be kind, thoughtful, and to find his own path in life. Perhaps we were too indulgent because James grew up with a generous heart but easily influenced by stronger personalities. He was brilliant with technology but sometimes naive with people. James was 36 when he met Audrey Williams at a charity gala 4 years ago. I remember getting his excited phone call the next morning. He had never spoken about any woman with such enthusiasm before. From his description, Audrey sounded accomplished and charming, a marketing executive for a luxury cosmetics brand. When I finally met her 2 weeks later, I understood the attraction. She was stunning with perfectly styled blonde hair, impeccable designer clothes, and a way of making everyone feel like the most important person in the room. But beneath her charm, I noticed how her eyes constantly assessed everything around her, calculating values and status. The way she admired my simple gold bracelet but dismissed my favorite handcrafted silver pendant told me volumes about her priorities. Still, James was happier than I had ever seen him, and at 36 he knew his own mind. Their romance moved with whirlwind speed. Within 3 months, they were engaged, and 6 months later, married in an extravagant ceremony that Audrey orchestrated down to the tiniest detail. Theodore had passed away just a year before, and I wished desperately that he could have been there to whisper his observations in my ear. He always had a knack for seeing through pretenses. The warning signs appeared gradually after the honeymoon. Audrey began suggesting that James needed to upgrade his car to match their new social status. She redecorated their home 3 times in 2 years, because each previous style was suddenly not sophisticated enough. When they visited me, her eyes would linger on my jewelry collection, displayed in the antique glass cabinet Theodore had bought me for our 20th anniversary. "Your pieces are so unique, Esperanza," she would say, fingering the pearls at her own neck. "Most of them look almost vintage, don't they? So different from what's fashionable now." I recognized the subtle dig for what it was. In Audrey's world, new was always better than old, expensive, better than meaningful. What she failed to understand was that many of my most precious pieces were intentionally understated. Theodore and I had learned early in our careers that true connoisseurs never flaunted their most valuable possessions. My jewelry collection wasn't just financially valuable, it was the physical embodiment of my life with Theodore. Each piece had a story, a memory attached. The jade pendant from our trip to China, the raw diamond ring from our anniversary visit to South Africa, the ruby earrings we found at a tiny shop in Myanmar that Theodore swore were once owned by royalty. I had a meticulous system for cataloging everything. Theodore had insisted on it for insurance purposes. Each piece was photographed, described, valued, and assigned an inventory number in a secure digital database that only my lawyer Harold and I could access. The most valuable pieces were listed under code names that revealed nothing about their true nature. The first time Audrey borrowed something without asking was 6 months after the wedding. A pair of sapphire earrings disappeared from my jewelry box after she and James visited for dinner. They reappeared 3 days later, with Audrey casually mentioning she had borrowed them for a work event. I said nothing, not wanting to create tension, but made a note to be more careful with my collection when she visited. But the pink diamond ring was different. It was the last gift Theodore gave me before his unexpected heart attack. We had been at an exclusive gem auction in Geneva, and Theodore had bid on the stone without telling me. It was a 3-carat pink diamond of exceptional clarity, but set in an intentionally simple platinum band that disguised its value. Only someone with trained eyes would recognize its exceptional quality. "This is for our 30th anniversary," he had said, slipping it onto my finger in our hotel room that night. "Rare and beautiful, just like our love." He died just 2 months later. The ring never left my finger until after the funeral, when I added it to my most secure collection. I had it professionally appraised and insured for $3 million, but I kept that information private. To anyone else, it looked like a pretty but unremarkable pink stone. Only Harold, my lawyer, knew its true value. I had decided long ago that James, and by extension, Audrey, would learn about the true nature of my collection only after I was gone. Given Audrey's materialism, I worried that knowledge might change their lives in ways that wouldn't be healthy for their marriage. The Atlantic Heights Country Club was hosting their annual Spring Charity Gala, an event that gathered the wealthiest and most influential people in our region. Audrey had been talking about it for months, mentioning casual tidbits about which celebrities might attend and which socialites had secured the most coveted tables. She had recently befriended Victoria Harrington, whose husband owned a chain of luxury hotels, and seemed desperate to cement her place in that social circle. "These connections are so important for my career," she told James over dinner at my house, the week before the gala. I was in the kitchen preparing coffee, but could hear every word. "Victoria says the Andersons will be there, and they're looking for a new marketing director for their foundation. It could be perfect for me." What she didn't say, but I clearly understood, was that she needed to look the part. In Audrey's world, appearances were everything. The right dress, the right shoes, the right jewelry could open doors that might otherwise remain firmly closed. 3 days before the gala, Audrey stopped by my house unexpectedly. James was away on a business trip, and she claimed she just wanted to check on me. "You know how James worries about you living alone," she said, accepting the tea I offered. Her eyes kept drifting to the cabinet where I kept some of my jewelry collection. Not the most valuable pieces, of course. Those were secured elsewhere. "I've managed just fine these past 5 years," I reminded her gently. "Theodore made sure I would be taken care of." Of course, she agreed quickly. "Though James mentioned your roof needed repairs. That must be so stressful on a fixed income." I nearly laughed at her assumption. Theodore and I had invested wisely over the years, and my financial situation was far more comfortable than she imagined. But I had never corrected her belief that I lived modestly. There was safety in being underestimated. "I manage my resources carefully," I said instead. "Would you like to see the garden before you go? The spring blooms are just starting." It was a deliberate distraction, and it worked. As we walked through the garden, Audrey received a phone call that she said was urgent. She left hurriedly, kissing my cheek and promising to call soon. Something about her visit left me uneasy. The next day, I had a long-standing lunch date with my sister Eleanor across town. Before leaving, I made a deliberate decision. I left my everyday jewelry box on my dressing table unlocked. The box contained mostly semi-precious stones and silver pieces of modest value. But I had recently placed the pink diamond ring there, having worn it to a memorial event for Theodore's colleague. I had a feeling Audrey might return while I was out. Call it intuition or simply knowing my daughter-in-law's patterns all too well. I made sure the house security cameras were functioning correctly before I left. Eleanor and I had a lovely lunch that stretched into afternoon tea. When I checked my phone around 4, there was a text from Audrey. Hope you don't mind, I borrowed your old ring for the party tonight. The one with the pink stone. It matches my dress perfectly. My heart stopped for a moment. The casual presumption stunned me, even though I had suspected she might do something like this. I took a deep breath before responding with a simple, "Have fun." Eleanor noticed my expression. "What's wrong?" Audrey took my pink diamond ring without permission. I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "The one from Theodore. But isn't that worth $3 million I finished for her? Yes." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Are you going to call James?" I shook my head slowly. "No. James always defends her. Says I misunderstand her intentions. But this time I have proof she took something without asking. This time there will be consequences." The violation I felt went beyond the value of the ring. That ring was Theodore's final gift to me, a symbol of 30 years of love and partnership. For Audrey to casually text about borrowing it as if it were a lipstick or scarf showed a profound disrespect, not just for me, but for what that ring represented. I remembered the day Theodore gave it to me so clearly. We had been in Geneva for the auction, and he had been unusually secretive about his bidding plans. When he presented the ring later in our hotel room, his eyes had sparkled with excitement. "This stone has a fascinating history," he told me. "It was discovered in Australia in the 80s, but has changed hands only twice before us. The color saturation is exceptional for a natural pink diamond. The clarity is nearly flawless. But I had them set it simply because I know how you appreciate understated elegance. The pink diamond was extraordinarily rare. Natural pink diamonds of that size and quality appeared on the market perhaps once in a decade. Its value would only increase over time. But beyond its monetary worth, it held the essence of Theodore's understanding of me, of what I truly valued. And now Audrey had taken it, calling it my old ring as if it were some costume jewelry gathering dust. I made my decision in that moment, sitting across from Eleanor in the quiet tea room. This would be the last time Audrey took something of mine without permission. It was time for a lesson about respect and boundaries that she would never forget. As Eleanor drove me home, I called Harold Finch, my lawyer of 30 years and one of Theodore's closest friends. Harold had helped us set up our estate plan and knew every detail of my jewelry collection. "Harold, it's Esperanza," I said when he answered. "I need you to record something officially. The theft of inventory item number 847, the pink diamond ring." There was a moment of silence before Harold responded. "Esperanza, that's the $3 million piece. Are you saying it's been stolen?" "Yes," I said firmly. "My daughter-in-law took it without permission to wear to a social event tonight. I have text evidence confirming she took it." "Did you tell her she couldn't take it?" Harold asked cautiously. "She never asked permission before taking it," I explained. "She sent a text after the fact saying she had borrowed it. That's not permission, that's notification after theft." Harold sighed deeply. "Esperanza, are you sure you want to go this route? This could have serious consequences for your relationship with James and Audrey." "I'm aware," I said. "But this isn't the first time she's taken my things without asking. It's the first time she's taken something of this value, something with such personal significance. There need to be consequences, Harold. If you file a police report about theft, they could arrest her," Harold warned. "Is that what you want?" I considered this for a moment. Did I want Audrey arrested? No. But I did want her to understand the seriousness of her actions. I wanted her to experience just for a moment the violation I felt every time she helped herself to my possessions. "I want the report filed," I said firmly. "I have documentation proving ownership, the insurance policy, and her text admission of taking it. If the police choose to act on that information, that's their decision." Harold was silent for a moment longer. "I'll file the paperwork electronically right now," he finally said. "But Esperanza, I've known you for 3 decades. This isn't like you. Are you certain this is how you want to handle this?" "Sometimes a strong lesson is the only one that sticks." I replied, thinking of how Theodore and I had raised James. Perhaps we had been too gentle, too understanding. Perhaps that's why he had grown into a man who couldn't set boundaries with his wife. I'll call the police myself once I'm home. Eleanor glanced at me as she drove. Are you sure about this, Espy? It seems extreme. What's extreme is thinking you can take something worth $3 million without asking, I replied. What's extreme is the ongoing disrespect Audrey has shown me since she married James. I hadn't told Eleanor everything. About the comments Audrey had made to her friends that I'd overheard at James's birthday party 3 months ago. Standing in the kitchen, I had heard Audrey in the living room speaking to Victoria Harrington. My mother-in-law has this whole cabinet of old jewelry she thinks is valuable. Audrey had laughed softly. Most of it looks like costume pieces from the 70s. James says we'll probably just sell it all when she passes. No one wears that vintage stuff anymore. The casual dismissal of my life's collection, the assumption that my carefully curated pieces were worthless, the planning for my death, all of it had cut deeply. I had said nothing at the time, but the memory had festered. When Eleanor dropped me at home, I checked the security camera footage. Sure enough, Audrey had entered my house using the spare key James had. The timestamps showed she had spent nearly 30 minutes in my bedroom before leaving with my ring. I called the local police department and reported the theft. I explained the situation calmly, providing the ring's description value and insurance documentation. I forwarded them Audrey's text as evidence. Ma'am, given the value of this item, this is grand theft, the officer told me. We'll need to respond accordingly. Do you know where the ring is currently? Yes, I said, pulling up the Atlantic Heights Country Club website on my computer. The person who took it is attending the Spring Charity Gala at the Atlantic Heights Country Club tonight. It started at 7 p.m. and will likely go until midnight. We'll dispatch officers to the location, the officer assured me. Please remain available by phone in case we need additional information. After hanging up, I sat in Theodore's old leather armchair, suddenly questioning my decision. Was I going too far? Would this irreparably damage my relationship with James? But then I remembered all the small boundaries Audrey had crossed over the years. The times she had rearranged my kitchen cabinets during visits because she thought her system was better. The way she had insisted on planning Theodore's memorial service, overriding my wishes for a small private gathering. The comments about my home being quaint and outdated when she thought I couldn't hear. Each incident alone seemed minor, not worth creating conflict over. But together they formed a pattern of disrespect that had gone unchecked for too long. Sometimes a dramatic lesson was the only kind that made an impact. I pulled up Audrey's Instagram page, where she had already posted a photo from the beginning of the gala. She was posing with Victoria Harrington, both women, in elegant evening gowns. Audrey's was a deep rose color that complemented the pink diamond on her hand, which she had positioned prominently in the photo. Her caption read, "Feeling like royalty tonight, charity event, give back diamonds." The irony of the hashtag #GiveBack wasn't lost on me. Giving back implied generosity, not taking without permission. I poured myself a small glass of Theodore's favorite scotch and waited for the inevitable phone call, tracking the gala through the social media posts of attendees. The event was clearly exclusive, with crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, and a string quartet. The perfect setting for Audrey to showcase her borrowed finery and cultivate the high society connections she craved. It was just past 9:30 when my phone rang. James's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath before answering. "Mom," his voice was tight with panic. "What's going on? Audrey just called me. She says the police are at the gala, questioning her about your ring. She's hysterical." "Did she ask permission to take my ring, James?" I asked calmly. "She said she texted you," he replied defensively. "After she had already taken it," I clarified. "That's not asking permission, that's informing me of a theft after the fact." "Theft, Mom, come on. It's just a ring. She was going to return it tomorrow." "Just a ring," I repeated. "James, that pink diamond was the last gift your father gave me before he died. It's worth $3 million. The silence on the other end told me this was news to him. Finally, he spoke, his voice stunned. $3 million, that can't be right. It looks so simple. Your father and I always believed that true quality doesn't need to announce itself," I said softly. I have the appraisal and insurance documentation. Harold has all the paperwork. Audrey took something extremely valuable without permission, and now she's experiencing the consequences of that choice. At precisely 9:15 that evening, two police officers entered the Atlantic Heights Country Club ballroom. I wasn't there to witness it, of course, but I pieced together what happened from multiple accounts later. The spring charity gala was in full swing. The elite of our community circulated beneath crystal chandeliers, champagne flutes in hand, making the connections and deals that would shape the coming year's social landscape. Audrey stood near the center of the room, engaged in animated conversation with Victoria Harrington, and an older man I later learned was the director of the Anderson Foundation, the very organization with the marketing position she coveted. She was laughing, her left hand gesturing expressively, the pink diamond catching the light with each movement. Several people had already commented on the unusual stone, and Audrey had been vague about its origins, implying it was a family piece. The officers approached discreetly at first, speaking to the event security. Then they moved purposefully across the ballroom toward Audrey. Conversations quieted as people noticed the police presence, turning to watch, with the avid curiosity of those who rarely encounter law enforcement in their privileged circles. "Excuse me, Mrs. Blackwell," the lead officer asked, interrupting Audrey mid-sentence. "Yes." Audrey replied, confusion evident in her expression. "We need to speak with you regarding a reported theft," the officer said, professional but firm. Victoria Harrington took a small step back, her eyebrows raised in surprise. The foundation director excused himself immediately. "There must be some mistake," Audrey said, her voice rising slightly. She glanced around, suddenly aware that many eyes were on her. "We received a report about a pink diamond ring valued at approximately $3 million, the officer continued. "The owner has reported it stolen and provided evidence that you took it without permission." The ballroom, already quieter, fell into shocked silence at the mention of the value. Audrey's face drained of color. "$3 million, she repeated, looking down at the ring on her finger as if seeing it for the first time. "That's impossible. It's just my mother-in-law's old ring. She knows I borrowed it." "Do you have permission in writing?" the officer asked. Audrey fumbled for her phone, pulling up our text exchange. "See, I told her I borrowed it and she said have fun. That's permission." The officer reviewed the texts. "Ma'am, informing someone after taking their property is not obtaining permission. Your text clearly states you had already taken the ring when you sent the message." By now, people had formed a loose circle around the scene, maintaining a semblance of polite distance while straining to hear every word. Victoria Harrington had retreated fully to the edges, clearly distancing herself from the unfolding drama. "This is ridiculous," Audrey insisted, her voice shaking. "It's a family misunderstanding. Let me call my husband." She tried calling James, but he was in the air, returning from his business trip. Her call went straight to voicemail. She then tried calling me, but I had silenced my phone, knowing she would try to reach me. "Mrs. Blackwell, given the value of the item in question, we need to take this matter seriously," the officer explained. "The owner has provided documentation of the ring's value and ownership. We need you to come with us to the station to provide a statement." "You're arresting me!" Audrey's voice rose to a near shriek. "At a charity event over a family misunderstanding." "We're not placing you under arrest at this time," the officer clarified. "But we do need a formal statement, and the item needs to be secured as evidence until this matter is resolved." Audrey reluctantly removed the ring, her hands shaking visibly. The officer placed it in an evidence bag, sealing and labeling it carefully. "The security cameras in this venue may have captured your entrance," the second officer noted. "We'll need to review that footage as part of the investigation." Indeed, the country club's security system had recorded Audrey's arrival, the pink diamond clearly visible on her hand as she presented her invitation at the entrance. This would later confirm that she had arrived wearing the ring, supporting the timeline I had reported. As the officers escorted Audrey toward the exit, whispers rippled through the crowd. The $3 million figure was repeated in hushed, incredulous tones. Several attendees discreetly took photos, the modern instinct to document scandal overriding social etiquette. Outside the venue, the situation escalated further. A local news van had been parked nearby covering the charity event as a social piece for the late news. Seeing police activity, a reporter approached camera operator in tow. "Excuse me, officers, is there a situation here?" the reporter asked, microphone extended. "No comment," the lead officer stated firmly, guiding Audrey toward the police cruiser. But the damage was done. Audrey's face, shocked and tearful, was captured on camera as she was escorted to the police vehicle. By morning, the footage would be playing on local news, and by afternoon it would be picked up by several gossip websites, with headlines like, "Socialite detained after wearing stolen $3 million diamond to charity event." Victoria Harrington, ever conscious of optics, had already begun damage control. As Audrey was led away, Victoria was overheard telling another guest, "I barely know her. She's been trying to join our committee for months, but something about her never seemed quite right." The foundation director, who had been speaking with Audrey earlier, approached Victoria. "Dodged a bullet there, didn't we? Imagine if we'd hired someone with such questionable judgment for the marketing position." The social consequences were unfolding even before Audrey reached the police station. The very connections she had been so desperate to cultivate were dissolving in real time, replaced by the kind of notoriety no one in her circles wanted. At the police station, Audrey provided a tearful statement, insisting repeatedly that it was all a misunderstanding. "Esperanza knows I borrow her jewelry sometimes," she told the investigating officer. "She's never had a problem with it before. I had no idea that ring was so valuable. It doesn't even look real." The officers, having confirmed the ring's authenticity and my ownership through the documentation Harold had provided, explained the seriousness of the situation. "Mrs. Blackwell taking property valued at over $1 million without explicit permission constitutes grand theft in this state," the detective explained. "Whether charges are pursued is up to the owner, but you need to understand the potential severity here." Reality was finally setting in for Audrey. Her carefully constructed social image was crumbling, and for the first time she was facing consequences that her charm and connections couldn't easily dismiss. James landed at 11:45 that night and immediately called me from the airport after listening to Audrey's frantic voicemails. I had been sitting in Theodore's chair, our wedding album open on my lap, looking at photos from simpler times. "Mom, what have you done?" His voice was strained, disbelieving. "What have I done?" I repeated quietly. "I reported a theft, James. Audrey took something extremely valuable without permission." "She's at the police station," he nearly shouted. "They're talking about pressing charges. This could ruin her career, her reputation, all over a misunderstanding that could have been handled privately." Was it a misunderstanding when she entered my home while I was out? When she went through my personal belongings? When she took something without asking first? I kept my voice steady, though my hand gripped the phone tightly. "I've overlooked too many boundaries being crossed, James. This time the stakes were simply too high." "It's a ring," Mom James insisted. "A thing. Is it worth destroying our family over a thing?" "That ring was the last gift your father gave me," I reminded him. "And it's worth $3 million. This isn't about the object, James. It's about respect. Something Audrey has never shown me." There was a pause on the line. When James spoke again, his voice was quieter, confused. $3 million, that can't be right. It's just a small pink stone." "Your father had an exceptional eye," I said. "The appraisal is current. Harold has all the documentation. That simple-looking ring is one of the most valuable pieces in my collection." "Why didn't you tell us?" James asked. "Would it have mattered? Should the value determine whether someone respects my belongings?" I countered. "If it were worth 300 instead of 3 million, would that make Audrey's actions acceptable?" James had no immediate answer for that. "I'm going to the police station," he finally said. "We'll talk about this tomorrow." "I can't believe you've done this, Mom." The line went dead. I sat for a long time, wondering if I had gone too far. The album on my lap showed Theodore and me on our 10th anniversary, heads bent together over a display of gems at an exhibition in London. He would have understood my actions tonight. Theodore had always believed in natural consequences, in learning through experience rather than just words. The next morning brought a flurry of calls. Eleanor phoned first, having seen the news. "SB Audrey's all over the local news. They're calling it the Charity Gala Gem Scandal. Are you okay? Before I could answer, call waiting beeped. It was Harold. Esperanza, we need to talk about next steps. The police are waiting to know if you want to press formal charges. Then James again, his voice heavy with fatigue. Mom, Audrey's parents are flying in. They're talking about suing you for defamation. This is spiraling out of control. By noon, the story had spread beyond local news. A gossip website had published a piece titled "Jewelry Heist at High Society Gala Socialite Caught Red-Handed with Mother-in-Law's Millions." The article included Instagram photos of Audrey wearing the ring at the beginning of the event, juxtaposed with blurry images of her being escorted out by police. Audrey's social media accounts had gone silent after a brief defensive post, claiming a terrible misunderstanding with family jewelry that was quickly deleted. But her social circle had not remained silent. Victoria Harrington had already publicly distanced herself, posting about the importance of integrity in our exclusive community without mentioning Audrey by name. James arrived at my house around 2 in the afternoon looking like he hadn't slept. He had dropped Audrey at their home and come straight to me. "This has to stop, Mom," he said as soon as I opened the door. "You've made your point. Audrey is devastated. The foundation position is definitely off the table. Her professional contacts are avoiding her calls. Isn't that punishment enough?" I invited him in and poured us both coffee before responding. "Sit down, James. We need to have an honest conversation about your wife's behavior over the past 4 years." For the next hour, I laid out the pattern I had observed, the small items taken without asking, the dismissive comments about my collection, the planning for my eventual death, the constant boundary violations. I showed him the security footage of Audrey entering my house and spending half an hour in my bedroom before taking the ring. "She told me you knew she was coming over," James said weakly. "She dropped by unexpectedly 3 days ago," I corrected. "Then came back when she knew I would be out." James looked stunned. "I had no idea it was like this." "Because you haven't wanted to see it," I said gently. "You've excused her behavior at every turn. When she reorganized my kitchen without asking you, said she was just trying to help. When she planned your father's memorial against my wishes, you said she was supporting me. When she talked about selling my jewelry collection after my death, you said nothing." "How do you know about that?" James asked, eyes wide. "I overheard her at your birthday party," I admitted. "Telling Victoria my collection was worthless costume jewelry you would sell when I died." James put his head in his hands. "I never said that. I would never say that." "But you didn't correct her, did you?" I pressed. "You've allowed her to disrespect me, my home, and your father's memory. And it's escalated to the point where she felt entitled to take something worth $3 million without permission." Before James could respond, his phone rang. It was Audrey's parents. He put the call on speaker. "James, we've consulted our attorney." Audrey's father's voice filled the room. "This is clear defamation. Esperanza deliberately humiliated our daughter publicly. We're prepared to file a lawsuit first thing tomorrow, unless she drops all charges and makes a public statement clearing Audrey's name." James looked at me, conflict evident in his expression. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "Richard, I don't think that's the right approach," James said carefully. "From what I've learned today, Audrey did take the ring without proper permission, and it is genuinely worth what Mom claims." "That's irrelevant," Richard snapped. "Family members borrow things all the time. Esperanza deliberately set Audrey up to be humiliated. She could have called Audrey directly if there was a problem. Like Audrey called to ask permission before taking the ring, I interjected, unable to remain silent. "Who is that?" "Are we on speaker?" Richard demanded. "Yes, Esperanza is here with me," James confirmed. "And Dad, I think we all need to take a step back. Threatening lawsuits isn't going to help anything." The conversation deteriorated from there, with Audrey's parents making increasingly hostile demands. When they hung up, James looked exhausted. "This isn't just about you and Audrey anymore," he said quietly. "Her parents are involved, the media is involved. Our friends are choosing sides. How do we come back from this?" It was a fair question. I had wanted to teach Audrey a lesson, but the situation had expanded beyond my expectations. Still, I didn't regret standing up for myself. We start with truth and accountability, I said firmly. Audrey needs to acknowledge what she did wrong. No more excuses, no more minimizing. A genuine apology and a commitment to respect boundaries going forward. James nodded slowly. And the charges? That depends on her, I said. I'm willing to drop everything if she takes full responsibility and agrees to certain conditions. But this pattern can't continue, James. Something had to change. As James prepared to leave, he paused at the door. There's something else you should know. This isn't the first time Audrey has taken things without permission. Victoria called me this morning. Apparently, Audrey borrowed a designer handbag from her last month and returned it damaged. And there have been other incidents with other friends, I think. I think this might be a pattern I've been blind to. The revelation didn't surprise me, but it saddened me deeply. Audrey's sense of entitlement extended beyond her treatment of me. It reflected a fundamental character issue that would need to be addressed for any real change to occur. After James left, I called Harold to discuss next steps. We agreed to prepare a formal agreement that would allow me to drop the charges under specific conditions. It would be a starting point for the difficult conversations ahead. That evening, I sat again in Theodore's chair, contemplating the day's events. Had I gone too far? Perhaps. But sometimes a dramatic wake-up call was necessary to break through denial and effect real change. I hoped that once the initial shock and anger subsided, this incident might lead to healthier relationships for all of us. I picked up the framed photo of Theodore from the side table. "What would you have done, my love?" I whispered to his smiling image. I could almost hear his gentle laugh, his pragmatic response. "Exactly what you did, Espy. Sometimes love means setting firm boundaries." 3 days after the gala incident, we gathered in Harold's office for what would prove to be a pivotal meeting. James and Audrey sat on one side of the conference table, Audrey's parents flanking her protectively. Harold and I sat opposite them with a mediator at the head of the table. A neutral party Harold had suggested to facilitate what promised to be a challenging conversation. Audrey looked nothing like the confident socialite who had strutted into the charity gala. Her face was pale, her designer outfit replaced by a simple blouse and pants. The media attention had been relentless, with several of her professional contacts publicly distancing themselves from the scandal. "Thank you all for coming," Harold began formally. "We're here to discuss a resolution to the current situation regarding the pink diamond ring belonging to Mrs. Esperanza Blackwell. A situation that never should have escalated to this point," Audrey's father interjected immediately. "This could have been handled privately within the family." Richard, the mediator, said calmly, "Everyone will have a chance to speak. Let's begin with establishing the facts that both parties can agree upon." Over the next hour, we methodically worked through the timeline, Audrey entering my home while I was out, taking the ring without prior permission, texting me after the fact, wearing it to the gala, and my subsequent actions. "The key issue," Harold summarized, "is whether taking an item worth $3 million without explicit prior permission constitutes theft, regardless of family relationships." Audrey had no idea of the ring's value, her mother insisted. "How could she? It looks like costume jewelry." "That's not relevant to the legal definition of theft," Harold pointed out gently. "Taking property without permission is still taking property without permission, regardless of its perceived value." We went back and forth, the conversation tense but controlled under the mediator's guidance. Finally, after nearly 2 hours, we reached the critical moment. "Esperanza is willing to drop all charges under certain conditions," Harold announced, sliding a document across the table. "These conditions are non-negotiable." The conditions were straightforward. Audrey would make a full apology, acknowledging she had taken the ring without permission. She would agree to never enter my home without my presence and explicit invitation. She would participate in 6 months of therapy to address her issues with boundaries and materialism, and she would complete 100 hours of community service at a jewelry-making program for underprivileged youth that Theodore had helped establish years ago. Audrey's parents began to protest immediately, but to everyone's surprise, Audrey herself raised a hand to silence them. "May I speak directly to Esperanza?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. The mediator nodded, and Audrey turned to face me fully for the first time since entering the room. "I took your ring without asking," she said simply. "Not just the ring, but other things over the years. I told myself it was okay because we're family, but that was just an excuse. The truth is, I've always been jealous of what you have, not just the jewelry, but your confidence, your knowledge, your relationship with Theodore. I wanted to be seen as someone special, someone with valuable things and important connections. I thought borrowing your ring would help me impress people who could advance my career." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "When the police said it was worth $3 million, I couldn't believe it. I never would have taken it if I'd known. But that's not an excuse either. I shouldn't have taken anything without asking, regardless of its value. I'm truly sorry, Esperanza. I was wrong." The room fell silent. It was the first genuine moment I had ever experienced with Audrey, the first time she had spoken to me without calculation or pretense. "Thank you for that honesty," I said after a moment. "It's all I've ever wanted from you, Audrey. Just authenticity and respect." James, who had been unusually quiet throughout the meeting, reached for Audrey's hand. "I want to apologize too, Mom. I should have paid more attention. I should have set clearer boundaries in our marriage from the beginning." It was a turning point. With the pretenses stripped away, we were finally having the honest conversation that should have happened years ago. Audrey's parents looked uncomfortable with their daughter's admission of guilt, but they remained silent as we worked through the details of the agreement. By the end of the meeting, Audrey had signed the document accepting all conditions. Harold would file the paperwork to drop the charges, and we would issue a brief joint statement describing the incident as a family misunderstanding that has been resolved privately. As we prepared to leave, Audrey approached me one more time. "I'd like to learn," she said hesitantly. "About jewelry, I mean. Not just the value, but the history, the craftsmanship, the things that made it special to you and Theodore." It was an olive branch I hadn't expected. I'd like that I replied, surprised by my own willingness to open that door. The following weeks brought gradual but significant changes. True to her word, Audrey began therapy sessions working with a counselor who specialized in issues related to materialism and self-worth. James attended some sessions with her, and they both reported that the process was challenging but illuminating. Audrey's community service at the jewelry-making program initially seemed like an imposition to her. She arrived for her first day with obvious reluctance. But something unexpected happened as she worked alongside the teenage girls in the program, most of them from difficult backgrounds, all of them talented in ways they hadn't yet recognized. "They're amazing," she told me after her third session, genuine enthusiasm in her voice for the first time. "This girl Tasha created a pendant design that could absolutely sell in a boutique. But she had no idea it was special until the instructor pointed it out." Watching Audrey discover the joy of mentoring these young women was a revelation. She began bringing design magazines to the sessions, showing the girls how their work compared to professional pieces. She leveraged her marketing background to help them present their creations more effectively. James noticed the change too. "She's different when she talks about the program," he told me over coffee one morning. "More animated, more genuine. Like she's found something that matters beyond appearances." Our own relationship was healing slowly as well. Audrey and I began meeting twice monthly for what we called jewelry lessons. I would select a piece from my collection and share its history, the technical aspects of its creation, the story of how Theodore and I had acquired it. Audrey proved to be an attentive student, asking thoughtful questions and gradually developing a genuine appreciation for craftsmanship over mere monetary value. During one such session, about 3 months after the incident, I finally brought out the pink diamond ring now returned to my possession. "This is a Type 3I pink diamond," I explained, placing it under a jeweler's loupe for her to examine. "Less than 2% of diamonds fall into this category. The color comes from a distortion in the crystal lattice that absorbs green light, creating the pink hue." Audrey studied it carefully. "It looks so different through the loupe. I can see why it's special now." "Value isn't always obvious at first glance," I said. "That's something Theodore taught me early in our relationship. The most precious things often require a trained eye to appreciate." Audrey looked up from the loop, her expression thoughtful. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. About how I've spent so much time chasing things that look valuable to others instead of finding what has real worth to me. It was a moment of genuine connection, one that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. The incident that could have permanently fractured our family was instead becoming a catalyst for growth and understanding. James, too, was finding his voice in new ways. He had always been the peacekeeper, avoiding conflict at all costs. Now he was learning to express his own needs and boundaries, both with Audrey and with me. I should have told you how uncomfortable I was when Audrey planned Dad's memorial, he admitted during a private lunch. I knew it wasn't what you wanted, but I was afraid of disappointing her. I put her feelings above yours, and that wasn't fair. These honest conversations were painful at times, but ultimately healing. Slowly, we were building a family relationship based on truth rather than appearances, on mutual respect rather than assumed entitlement. By the 6-month mark, the scandal had largely faded from public memory, replaced by newer social dramas. Audrey had lost some of her fair-weather friends, but had gained something more valuable, a clearer understanding of herself and what truly mattered to her. Perhaps the most surprising development came when Victoria Harrington, who had so quickly distanced herself from Audrey after the incident, reached out to inquire about the jewelry program for at-risk youth. I heard what Audrey's been doing there, she told me when we spoke by phone. It sounds like something worth supporting. My foundation is looking for new community initiatives to fund. I arranged a meeting between Victoria and the program director, with Audrey presenting the students' work. The genuine pride in Audrey's voice, as she showcased the girls' creations, was worlds away from the social climbing desperation that had driven her to take my ring. These young women have extraordinary talent, she told Victoria and the other potential donors. What they need isn't charity but opportunity, the chance to develop their skills and connect with mentors who recognize their potential. Victoria committed to a substantial donation that day, and for once I believed her interest was genuine rather than a social performance. Something about seeing Audrey's transformation had perhaps sparked reflection in Victoria as well. That evening, James called to share the good news about the donation. "Mom, you won't believe what Audrey did today," he said, his voice warm with pride. "She was amazing, completely in her element, but not for herself, for these kids." "I'm not surprised," I replied truthfully. "She's finding her authentic gifts. That's worth more than any diamond." A year after the infamous charity gala incident, we gathered at my home to celebrate my 66th birthday. The dining room table was set with Theodore's favorite china flowers from my garden, arranged in crystal vases he had collected during our travels. James and Audrey arrived first, bringing a homemade cake rather than the expensive bakery creation Audrey would have insisted on in the past. Their relationship had a different quality now, a genuine partnership rather than the performance of perfect couplehood they had previously maintained. "Happy birthday, Mom," James said, hugging me tightly. "Dad would have loved seeing us all together like this." "He would indeed," I agreed, feeling Theodore's presence in the room as strongly as if he were still with us. Audrey presented me with a small box wrapped simply in blue paper. "It's not much," she said with uncharacteristic nervousness, but I made it myself. Inside was a silver pendant, clearly handcrafted but with surprising skill. A small pink stone, not a diamond but a tourmaline, was set at its center. "I've been taking metalworking classes," Audrey explained. "The girls at the program inspired me. The stone is from one of the suppliers who donates materials to us. I know it's not perfect, but it's beautiful," I said, sincerely fastening it around my neck immediately. "Truly beautiful, Audrey." And it was not because of flawless execution, but because of the thought and effort behind it. A year ago, Audrey would have bought an expensive designer piece chosen for its brand name rather than any personal significance. This handcrafted pendant represented real growth. Eleanor arrived next, followed by Harold and his wife and a few close friends who had known Theodore and me for decades. As we enjoyed dinner together, the conversation flowed easily, touching on memories, current projects, and future plans. "The jewelry program is expanding to 2 new locations," Audrey announced when asked about her community service, which had evolved into a permanent volunteer position long after her required hours were completed. We've got 10 graduates who have been placed in apprenticeships with local jewelers, and 3 who have started selling pieces online. The pride in her voice was genuine, focused on the young women's accomplishments rather than her own role. It was a profound shift from the Audrey who had been so desperate to impress Victoria Harrington and her circle. Later, as we moved to the living room for coffee and cake, I found myself sitting beside James on the sofa that had been Theodore's favorite spot. "I've been thinking about boundaries lately," he said quietly. "How important they are, and how hard they can be to establish." "Your father would say that good fences make good neighbors," I replied with a smile. "And good family relationships, too." "I wish I had understood that sooner," James admitted. "All those years of trying to keep everyone happy by avoiding conflict, I was actually making things worse." "We all have our lessons to learn," I said, patting his hand. "The important thing is that we remain open to learning them no matter our age." Across the room, Audrey was showing Eleanor the designs she had been working on for the jewelry program's upcoming exhibition. Her enthusiasm was infectious, her focus entirely on the work itself rather than how it might advance her social standing. The pink diamond ring that had catalyzed so much change sat in my jewelry box upstairs. I wore it occasionally now, no longer feeling the need to keep it hidden away as a private memory. In fact, I had recently begun the process of donating several valuable pieces from my collection to museums where they could be appreciated by the public, keeping only those with the deepest personal significance. Theodore and I had spent our lives recognizing value in unexpected places, collecting not just gems, but experiences, relationships, knowledge. That was the real legacy I wanted to pass on to James, and yes, to Audrey as well. After our guests departed, leaving just the 3 of us, Audrey helped me clear the last of the dishes, while James built a small fire in the fireplace against the evening chill. "I never properly thanked you," Audrey said, suddenly placing a stack of plates in the cabinet. "For what I asked, though, I suspected I knew." "For stopping me," she said simply. "For caring enough to set a boundary when I was spiraling into someone I don't like very much in retrospect. It was humiliating and painful at the time, but it was also necessary. Sometimes the most valuable lessons are the most difficult ones," I replied. "I didn't do it to punish you, Audrey. I did it because I saw someone with real gifts losing herself in superficial pursuits." I know that now, she nodded. "And I'm grateful. Not just for the lesson, but for the second chance to be part of this family, to really be part of it, not just performing the role I thought I should play." We joined James by the fire, the 3 of us sitting in comfortable silence for a while. The pendant Audrey had made rested against my collarbone, not valuable in monetary terms, but priceless in its significance. "I've been thinking about worth lately," I said finally. "About how we determine what has value in our lives. Theodore used to say that anything that can be taken from you without your consent isn't truly yours to begin with. What belongs to us most deeply is what can never be stolen: our character, our wisdom, our capacity for growth and love." James nodded thoughtfully. "Dad always did have a way of cutting through to what matters." "He would be proud of both of you," I said sincerely. "Of the hard work you've done this past year, individually and together." As the evening wound down and they prepared to leave, I found myself filled with a profound sense of peace. The incident that could have permanently fractured our family had instead become a catalyst for authentic connection and growth. There was still work to be done, boundaries to be maintained, trust to be further rebuilt, but the foundation was now solid in a way it had never been before. Standing at the door, watching them drive away, I whispered a thank you to Theodore, wherever his spirit might be, for the lessons he had taught me about recognizing true value, for the strength to stand firm when necessary, and for the wisdom to know when to open the door to new beginnings. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone you love? It takes courage to risk conflict for the sake of authentic relationship. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found value in my experience, please like this video, subscribe to hear more of life's complicated lessons, and share with someone who might need encouragement to stand firm in their own boundaries. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the most precious things in life aren't the ones with price tags attached.